Yes, we're recording. We're on. Hi, welcome everybody to the week 6 and I guess the final Zoom meeting of the AOD and Homelessness Community of Practice. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which you are either watching this video or recording of this video. Just acknowledge the ongoing impact of colonisation and the ways in which we can improve our practice and our work to better support work with Indigenous people. And yes, so my name's Naomi. I just will be coordinating this today and keeping the conversation moving. But we'll have a quick whip around the other ladies that are here, and you can introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Olivia, and I am I'm clinical consultant with Odyssey in the Northwest, and that's about it. In our call service. I'll hand it over to maybe Danielle.
Hi, I am Danielle. I'm Service Development Practice Leader. I just forgot my job. County in Fitzroy. And formerly I was working in the IAP space in housing. So at that crisis drop-in end, and yeah, here to answer general housing questions.
Thank you.
I'm Blanca from Wombat Housing and Support Services. I'm the team leader here for the youth support and MyApp program.
And I'm Chloe Bennett at Wombat Housing, pretty new to Wombat Housing, about a month and a half in, and I'm the team leader of our youth justice and leave-in care housing programs.
Great, thank you. What we had planned for today was to have Lenka and Chloe provide us with an overview of some of the support, the youth support services, youth-specific support services, supports and services, I should say, in the Northwest, and also explain a little bit around some of the practices we've been working with youth and why the services and supports are different to those that are provided to adults, and to understand how some of the transitions from, I guess, youth services to adult services might be made a little bit easier. So if I throw it over to you both, and yeah, open up for questions and stuff if you like, and we'll jump in if there's anything that isn't clear as well.
Okay. Do you want to talk a bit about leaving care?
Yeah, maybe I'll talk about some of the young, because we both work with young people, I guess our teams do, but they're very different cohorts, and I think that's important to remember in that identifying, the young person, identifying some support needs and then referring to appropriate services. So the services that the young people that we support in our programs are going to be quite different to the services that the young people that Lenka's programs are going to be linked in with. So for example, our youth justice housing program, so we work across the West for that, and it's any young person who has a justice involvement, youth justice involvement, who's homeless or at risk of homelessness, we support. So we support an intensive outreach case management capacity. We have 9 transitional housing properties that we support young people in for the West, and that program's across the whole state. So it's called Youth Justice Community Support. So it's across the whole state. Every area has transitional properties, and we're just fortunate enough to be the organisation that supports the young people in the West. So it's different because they've got statutory involvement, I guess, and that's probably the biggest thing. And that's the same with our leave-in care young people as well. There's statutory involvement from child protection or youth justice when they come to us for support. And so for that, it actually works in our benefit because we can be kind of like a good cop, bad cop kind of relationship for most of the time, I would say. And so we're very fortunate to have a really flexible program, and what intensive case management is for our program is very different to what Lenka's program is. We don't have many stats or KPIs that we have to meet, which means that our work is extremely flexible and just is really tailored to what the young person wants or needs at that time. And it can come in ebbs and flows. They might need 4 appointments a week with us to take them to school to get them set up, and we can do that. Whereas other programs have maybe 3 months that they can work with someone, when we can work with someone as long as they want to work with us for both those programs. Yeah, so I say that's probably the biggest difference in the cohort that we get. We get our referrals from youth justice and child protection, whereas Linka's program's like a mainstream youth homelessness program.
So we get our referrals via the access point, which for us is Unison.
Yeah, but I think the way the frameworks that we work with young people, there are similarities in the way that people work with adults, and I've just come from a job where I switched from working with youth to then adults. Very similar, but I guess just the level of dependence can be quite different, and also independence is quite different. So from a youth perspective, I think we probably focus more on that trauma-informed practice, knowing that we know the stats, young people that are coming into both our support services have a really, really high chance of being victim, but also sometimes, for us, perpetrators of family violence, both usually, abuse within the family, but also within the community. So we really do have to work from that assumption that everyone has had an experience of trauma that we work with, and that's going to be quite fresh because they are young and was in the developmental stages of their life. And then I guess that leads into, we do have to work from the assumption that they probably haven't had proper schooling, their whole lives, and may not be able to articulate their feelings, and will probably lash out in their behaviours because they don't know how to verbalise or have been taught how to verbalise their feelings.
Yeah, and that lack of, most likely a lack of a positive mentor as well in their life that can lead by example. That's often lacking in a lot of the clients we deal with as well.
And I guess that's sometimes where we come in, is that we are that positive mentor,
and also persistent. I think that with any youth work, I feel like that's always been how you can build your rapport with a client, is just being there. Not being that person who is then just going to go, oh, well, I'm just going to wash my hands of you. It's that constant persistence of just checking in, what's happening, I'm here when you need me, that kind of approach as well. And then obviously the strength-based stuff.
Strength-based stuff, I think particularly for young people, is just, focusing on what they're good at. I know for a lot of the young people that we work with in our youth justice program, they're constantly told, whether it's at court or in custody or by the youth justice worker or the police, what they're not doing right. So there's a really important space for us to then, get them to reflect on what they are good at and what their goals are, and how they can achieve their goals with our support.
Yeah. And I guess the other thing is too for us is that it's voluntary. So at any point, the young person can say whether they need the help or not. If they feel like they don't need the help, they can say, no, I'm okay, I don't need your help. And that's fine. We are there to offer the support if they would like it. We would definitely like to keep in contact. But yeah, at the end of the day, they're the ones driving it. They're the ones driving their case plans. And we are there just to support them to get through all the barriers that they're experiencing.
Yeah. I think the biggest difference that I've noticed with youth services, or in the housing sector anyway, than adults, there is a focus on outreach case management, I guess. Whilst there are outreach adult housing case management programs, there is an assumption that adults can get to appointments in-house and travel and navigate public transport and do that for themselves. They're a bit more independent. So I think for youth, we're really relying on the fact that we can outreach to all our clients and transport them to appointments and kind of be that missing link or the glorified taxi driver for them. But sometimes that's when the best conversations happen, is when you're sitting in a car because you're not facing each other and you're just allowing space and time. And we find that that's when young people open up the most, is when you're not there for particular, or we're here today because we're talking about this. It's just transporting from one thing to another, and that's when some of the best conversations come out.
Yeah, and it's about using every interaction with the client as a way to gather more information. You're building that relationship, because definitely with youth, they scare easy. And if you come on too strong in the beginning and you want to know everything right there and then, they're more likely to just back off, and they want to build trust with you first.
Yeah, and they can smell insincerity from a mile away.
They'll call you out.
They will call you out on it if they think that you're being fake or if you're disingenuous. Like, they will call you out. especially I find when I was going into custody, they have had many workers in their time, so they can smell fear almost in you, and so it's really important to be just extremely honest, particularly in the housing sector.
Yes.
Really honest about what can and cannot be done, and not promising anything, because as we all know, the housing sector, we can't provide timelines, we can't provide a house as much as we would love to. So just being really honest about what we can provide them, and then what they can also do.
That's about I think, unless there's anything else anyone wanted to know or ask.
Can I ask some questions?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks so much for that. Like that, you get a really strong sense of your commitment to the work, and in really wanting to create some really positive outcomes for young people. And some of those practice principles that you talk to, I think, just be as equally appropriate with adults and working with adults as well. But those frameworks just aren't utilised in that space, or as much as they could be. But I really loved hearing about, Chloe, about your program where it's, you're not, and I think a lot of adult workers would be really loving to hear this. No KPIs, you've got no real targets, you just work with the young person as long as they need it, wraparound support, all that kind of stuff, which just sounds perfect. But, especially again in that recognition of the young people coming through youth justice and child protection, where they probably have experienced a huge amount of trauma and a huge amount of violence, and not good, strong attachments to parent figures and what have you. But there was a couple of things that I wanted to ask. One was, I guess, just in relation to that, this idea that, you're coming into work as really strong mentors, and you're persistent, you want to be there as a reliable point of contact for young people. And given that they probably, we can assume that they are lacking some pretty strong kind of attachment to parental figures and others in their lives, like how do you find negotiating an exit strategy when you're like,
really great question. And I think and I think this isn't just for young people, this is for across the board in any
correct
sector, is that we need, whilst we want to be everything, we can't, and that we need to be building transferable relationships, because we know within the community service sector there is a high turnover, because just the work we do, that staff are going to leave and find other jobs, or go on maternity leave, or long holidays, whatever it is, and so we need, that's part of our role as workers, is to be building those relationships. And also,
can you tell me a little bit more about how you do that?
Yeah, well, say setting them up for the long term. So knowing, and I also think that like exit planning should be a conversation from the very first time that you meet someone as well. So it's not this massive shock when 2 years hits, or whatever it is, that, oh, by the way, so this is our last appointment, bye. That it's a constant conversation around, okay, the program has to finish in 2 years, what are we going to do to set you up for the long term? So it's really conversations that are going to outlast our relationship, and building connections are going to outlast the program.
That's right. And not building dependency, because that's the other, can be another issue, is that if you try and do everything for them, that builds that dependency, and then you kind of it's to their detriment, really, because then they're not going to be able to do those things on their own. So like Chloe said, exactly the same thing, just kind of building them up to that point.
And what about as workers, like because I know people come into this space because they are really purpose driven and they're value driven, and they want to help, they want to work with people. So how do you kind of reflect on your own boundaries around that stuff to ensure that there isn't that dependence, and ensure that it is about empowering that young person? Do you have really strong kind of piece of provision and
so we combat that in many ways, and we have case management every 2 weeks where we talk about cases, and we kind of debrief with each other and sort of catch up. We also have individual supervision and also group peer supervision.
Yeah, wow.
And we have an open door policy, so people just pretty much can come to us all the time to chat about things.
Yeah, great.
So we can just all debrief.
Yeah. Because it's a tricky line sometimes, isn't it? And it's when you're not really aware of it that it becomes problematic.
Sometimes it takes someone else to reflect that back to you.
Correct.
Oh, whoa, I didn't realise that because you're in it,
Yeah.
That's the same when a client's in crisis as well, I think, too, is that you can get so in it, you start going along on that train journey, And sometimes it just takes that external person to say, hey, let's just sit down for a minute.
Take a step back.
Yeah, take a step back and let's just work through this.
Yeah, it sounds like you're providing really fantastic support for young people, but you really well supported as workers too, which is fantastic because that doesn't always happen. Well,
away for a second.
Lenka, I'm really interested in exactly what services are available in terms of, because I'm hearing, I know a little bit about youth justice and leaving home, but there's other stuff that's available, isn't there, Lenka?
Yes, there's plenty of stuff. I mean, it depends what you kind of, any particular area that you're thinking about, or
Just about what options are there. If you've got a homeless person on your books, what options are available to them? You're talking about refuge and other times. You're talking about what, for example, there's, there's, is it ATAPs or things like that? Like there's lots of different services that come under the heading of youth homelessness services.
Yeah, so we've got, there's obviously refuges there, and they're all different kinds of types, which I think Danielle has spoken about before.
Yeah, but maybe you want to elaborate on what youth get at a refuge, just because it is slightly different from the kind of expectations that are on adults at Crisis CoP.
Okay. So youth, well, it varies. I mean, you can get a 1-night vacancy, or you can get up to 6 nights, or you can get, there are youth in refuges at the moment that stay there for pretty much long periods of time because there is just no exit strategy. There's also the foyer kind of model, which is quite good, which I think I've spoken about before. And refuge,
the one that's linked to is the foyer that one that's linked to higher education?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
And they have different areas. Like I think there's one in Kangan
Broadmeadows.
Yeah, one in Broadmeadows.
Right, so I can speak to foyers because they're both, the big ones here are run by Launch. So that's Kangan and Broadmeadows, Holmes Glen. Broadmeadows and where's the other one? Oh gosh, I just said I could speak.
There's one in Shepparton, and there's also Chisholm. The TAFE Chisholm have got a couple attached to them in the east.
Neither of those were the ones I meant, but either way. So we've got 2 youth foyers. To get into the youth foyer, they need to be involved in study. They can stay up to 2 years, but they need to be studying or on a pathway to study. And so they work with them around that. They do work to get them enrolled in TAFE through the partner TAFE, and they work on other things, so their employment. The youth foyers are really special in that they work from a really strengths-based perspective. The Launch ones worked from a perspective called advantaged thinking. So it's all about what skills and opportunities these young people have rather than what their, deficits or issues or complexities might be. So they will work with those things, but it's coming from that perspective of what are their strengths, how can we build on that to work towards independent living. So the foyers, I think I've been out to them, are phenomenal, but they are for clients who are ready to be engaged and working on their issues. So it may be that they have some drug and alcohol, but they really need to be sort of engaged in working on that and staying in study and other things for that to be.
And the exit strategy for that is based around private rental. So, private rental.
Yeah.
In a refuge, I don't know if all of them have them, but most of them will have a caseworker, and they usually will work with that young person to look at alternative housing options. What else?
So do you have private rental, like PrAP and those sorts of things? Do they sit under different people in different programs?
No, it's no different. No different. No, not via Unison. It's all the same. They have access like anyone else to PrAP services. There's also the the private rental brokerage?
Yeah. So Vincent Care in the north, they also have PrAP. They also have PRB, private rental brokerage assistance, and that's for young people who are going into private rental. And that's a lump sum of money that can assist with, setting up the property, first month's rent in advance. kind of anything you want to use it for. So that's there for young people who are, in the north looking for private rental, and that can be through share housing as well. They also have a program at Vincent Care in the north. This is their Glenroy office, called YPRAP. And that's for young people. It's called Youth Early Entry Program. I can't think of the exact thing, but it's for young people who have an emerging or diagnosed mental health concern, and maybe would make that would prohibit them or make it quite difficult to navigate private rental by themselves. So there's a support worker there that pairs and tries to find matches for young people to then share house, and then we'll do the work to find the private rental with them. And really, it's all about building up their independent living skills to go into share housing, but also to be able to budget and manage the tenancy on their own, because they will be on the lease. There's also a fair bit of money attached to that program as well. So it goes
how do you manage someone who's under 18 signing a lease?
Yeah, very very difficult. Very difficult. Yeah, and that's I get that's a problem across the board, is that young people under the age of 18, and where does their rights lie, I guess.
Yeah, but those clients, I guess, because they're so vulnerable because of their age, would be more geared towards supported accommodation, which is the refuges and those kinds.
Yeah, and would that be lead tenant as well? Do you have any much to do with that?
So that's through child protection. So lead tenant's only for young people that have come through child protection, and then getting to the ages of 16, 17, and are deemed appropriate for lead tenant. So that all goes through child protection internally. Yeah. Their placement unit will decide who's appropriate fit for lead tenant and go into that. There are young people that coming out of child protection involvement, whether that's resi care or kinship care, and they're turning 18 and there's no plan in place. And that's when they come to our program, where we house the people that have got no plans at all. But there's also other programs that have come on board, like in this leave-in care space, or kids that have had a child protection involvement in the past. Compass, I'm not sure if you guys have heard of Compass. Brand new is it's a social impact bond. I think it's the first one in Victoria. So they actually put out to market to get investors to raise $14 million. And this is between Vincent Care, Anglicare and CommBank. They raised $14 million. That money was then invested into spot purchasing properties, because there was just no properties available. So spot purchasing properties, but also head leasing properties for young people leaving care. When they meet their KPIs, the investors get a dividend. So that's how that program works. So people are really looking outside the box in terms of youth homelessness. And we know that the young people coming through child protection, their chances of going into the homelessness service system are like tenfold. So it's really that early intervention conversation has started, and programs, even if without state government involvement, they're starting to evolve, which is really great.
Yeah.
I'm
working with, for example, I've got a young person. They're currently female, using 17 years old. And they don't have they've been couch surfing, wanting to, with people that use and wanting to get out of that scene. What do I do?
I would be referring them to a housing case manager, who would then try and get them into a refuge. So I would be taking them to an access point to get that referral done, so that you can get the housing worker involved. And I think a supported refuge sounds like it would be good.
Yeah. And you would just line up as usual with everybody?
Yeah, so with any access point, it's always best to get there at 9 a.m. Or call at 9 a.m. to book an appointment. Every access point works a little bit different, but the earlier the better, because sometimes you can be waiting around literally all day, and we know for our young people, they don't like that, doing that. So the earlier the better. They'll book them in, they'll get an IAP assessment completed, and that's when the IAP workers will refer to any vacancies. And so vacancies are day to day. So there might not be a vacancy that day, or there might be a 15-year-old that's going to be prioritised for that vacancy above your 17-year-old. So it just depends on the day, really, as to what's available.
Yeah.
And
depending on what area they're kind of in, whether you want to tell them to go to Front Yard or Unison or Sashes, any of those access points would be able to assist.
And I would also say just ring first. I know we're Northwest, but as an example, in the St Kilda and Cheltenham offices, we actually have a specific youth IAP worker who could probably book them in for an appointment over the phone so that they don't have to come in and wait with everyone else. Whereas at our Collingwood office, we don't have that, and they do need to come in and wait with everyone else.
Yeah, and so like we've said, all access points are different. So
Yeah, ring first. As another example, like in the south, in St Kilda, I think a 17-year-old female would get a refuge bed pretty quickly, but you know, a 23-year-old male might not, and they're able to give you a bit more tailored advice around that stuff.
Yeah.
So
And we're
youth
always
services-
happy here at Wombat to take clients want to call us. We're always happy to try and link them in as well with an access point. So there's always that option.
Yeah, I think like housing, having a housing case, like a case manager dedicated to housing is a really good first step, because, you know, their job will be to look at all housing options. And it may be that they go to a youth, youth rehab through YSAS, or for an amount of time, or even a detox, or, you know, there's mental health supported accommodation through Mind or Co-Health. You know, it's just really about identifying if they can live independently or if they need supported accommodation, and what the options are from there.
Yeah. Goes up to 25. Do all youth housing services go up to 25?
Generally, some of them are a little bit different. Like some go to 21, some go to 24. But generally, up to 25.
Yeah.
Usually, in my experience in the south as well, the support services go up to 25 until your 25th birthday. So 24 and 11 months, you know, once you're 25, you're an adult. But some of the refuges don't go up to 25. They'll really cap it at like 23 or even 21 for some of them.
Yeah.
But the supports generally get right up to 25.
Can you tell me a little bit about Front Yard?
What would you like to know about Front Yard? It's generally youth focused. They have an access point there. They have a lot of other services, which I think includes medical, education, employment,
legal.
They also have crisis beds there for people with a history of sleeping rough, which is a new section that they opened up not that long ago.
It's pretty much a one-stop shop for youth homelessness. So the idea is that you can go there, any young person can go there. They've got extended hours, not 9 to 5 later, because they know young people are going to be roaming the streets at 7, 8 o'clock, and also on the weekends. And that the idea is that you can attend there and kind of get a lot of things, be supported in a lot of different ways. So they have food, they have like music therapy, they have like settle and come 1 day a week. They've got a nurse always there. They've got, youth law based there, and housing workers, housing case management. They also have different case management programs. Yes. So it's a really one-stop shop for youth homelessness.
Yeah, they are quite busy. So the case management waiting list can be quite long, but that's when, depending on where the client is kind of in what area, that's where they can like refer them on to a service like Wombat. If they're kind of like within our area, we do sometimes go a bit out of our area because we do a lot of outreach. So yeah, there is that option as well if they can't take the client on straight away.
Thank you.
That Compass program sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's insane.
Do you have any information that you can send through about that, or should I just go?
No, I can definitely send information through. So referrals, it's quite tight in terms of the ages. It's 17 and a half to 18 and a half is the time that someone can be referred. They cover Bendigo, Northwest. I feel like there's one other region, but I can't think of it at the moment. And it's all share housing. I can't remember if I told you that. So they support young people into shared housing, with the aim of them taking over the lease at the end of a head lease, 12 months.
And it's supported.
It's not, well, that's case managed. It's case managed. So,
okay.
So it's not supported housing, but they're going into housing being supported. And so if the young person has left, child protection involvement 18 and they didn't get a referral but do want to, between 18 and 18 and a half, there's an external way you can self-refer or get a service like ours or you to refer your young person through Melbourne City Mission. There's like a leave and care hotline. That information as well. Yeah.
So is it mainly the live-in care people that go through Compass, or is it anyone?
It's anyone that's had a child protection involvement. So they may have only had an order, a reunification order with their family from the ages of 10 to 15, and then child protection. We're like, okay, all good. They're still potentially eligible. There's certain orders and then
Priorities.
that make them eligible, but they don't have to be on that order at time of referral.
Yeah, that just sounds fantastic.
Yeah, it's really exciting that there's, I guess, new things happening in the homelessness sector. You know, we know that transitional properties aren't working, I guess, and
Well, they're not really transitional.
They're not
anymore.
transitional. You know, there's a backlog. People are staying in there for many, many years, and so it's really exciting that, you know, people are thinking outside the box, and then there's new programs popping up. New homelessness.
And for the people coming through your program, your initial program, the Youth Justice and Child Protection one, I can't remember what that was called, that program.
Which one, sorry?
Or your program that you
I've got like 4 different programs. But we just kind of call it Youth Justice and Leaving Care.
Yeah. So how long on average do you work with young people for?
I'd probably say on average 2 years.
Yeah.
Which is really different to youth, like general youth homelessness, or just homelessness in general. Most people have, I know the previous role that I was in, we did adult outreach homelessness. We had, it was like a 3 to 6 month program, and that was it. That's all we were funded for. And we used to just mix them around to the 3-month program, then to the 6-month program if they needed extra support.
Yeah.
So it's really unique.
Do you have like, have you had any evaluations done on it? Because it sounds like it seems to be.
It's being done next year. So this
awesome.
It's been around since 2009, and it's going up for tender next year. Worth an external evaluation. But I'll just talk from my experiences, because I used to be a case manager in this program for at Vincent Care. The relationships that you were able to build with that persistence and consistency, knowing that time is on your side. And, you know, and if they don't attend 3 appointments, you're not going to close them, which is a lot of homelessness programs. That really can build some fantastic working relationships.
And particularly for young people who are the most vulnerable.
Yeah, and that's, I guess, like the thing that I've come to realize is that young people who have a justice background, and I used to work with young people coming out of custody, and it was my job to get them out of custody into a housing pathway, because they weren't allowed to leave when you're young, and you're not allowed to leave unless you've got an exit option because of duty of care. And so I had a role where I had to get them out with a housing option, and it was the most impossible job. And I was finding real barriers with the homelessness service system. And I was feeling that the young people I was working with, they were at the bottom in terms of priority in regards to the general youth homelessness population. So, you know, if you do have a young person that's got a specific, need or complexity, there are usually programs for that, and I would heavily suggest trying to go through those programs as opposed to youth homelessness. It's the general youth homelessness, because it can be quite difficult to advocate for a young person coming out of custody, or they have a recent conviction where they didn't go to custody. Can be quite hard to advocate for in the homelessness space.
And why is that? Is that just the stigma, just the general stigma around?
Yeah. And also youth home, there are young people who have just been thrown out of home because maybe, identified as gay, and their parents were like, oh, you can get out. You know, they are a lot more, they are seen as less of a risk, I guess, in a supported accommodation, in a refuge way, than a young person coming out of custody, even though they both might be at need exactly the same.
I guess, the one thing that always is maybe a contentious comment, I don't know, I suspect most people would agree, but I don't know that it's appropriate to say, but this idea, the way that risk is identified, the risk is not identified from the client's perspective or the young person's perspective, it's identified more from a management perspective and an organisational perspective.
I agree, yeah. You could have someone who's extremely complex, there's a lot of complex issues going on, but they're going to be fine, in a housing situation. But there's that stigma attached to, oh no, you've got all these complexities, you can't possibly maintain it. No, we're not going to have you. Yeah.
And those complexities can be just even drug use. Like I'm talking justice, but I've seen even with, the mental health support accommodation, people say that they come from a risk harm management, point of view. But if they see that someone's self-medicating with marijuana, they're, oh, no, so it's biases across a lot of different complexities as well. Yeah. And
I just find that interesting, that I guess the only reason people are deemed, because everybody's complex. Like, we're not talking about clients, we're just individuals. I'm complex. We're all complex. But the only reason that people are targeted with that brush is because of the silos of funding and the siloed sectors that it then becomes, it's only complex because they need to access a range of supports, not the individual themselves.
Yeah.
Which I always find really tricky because it just adds to the stigma, you know, that's stigma the judgment. But but I'm totally going to have a look up that Compass thing. That sounds great. As does your program. Like, I hope the evaluation goes well. It sounds as though, you know, comparatively, what you're doing, you know, meets all the expectations around best evidence-based practice.
Yeah, it's just unfortunate. I guess funding from a government perspective is, you know, outcomes based. But you know, what is an outcome? You know, and I guess that's conversations that we've been having in our team is, there are KPIs to be met, but what is an outcome for our young people? And sometimes it's them calling you, not you calling them, you know, and that's, it also comes down to worker satisfaction and being able to come back every day, you know.
Oh, totally. I mean, a lot of the burnout for workers is not in relation to working with clients, it's in relation to systems barriers and
absolutely, and the lack of housing for our program. That's a big issue for us and our clients, obviously. But
so we just need to get onto. We all need to get onto Combat and just get this bigger. Get this. It's so true, though. You know. Yeah. Anyway, I won't. We're recording. I won't just keep spouting out my opinion about things. But that was super helpful. Does anyone have any other questions that they want to ask Lenka and Chloe while we have them? Danielle or Olivia, you guys?
I don't have any questions, but I did remember that the two foyers are at Broadmeadow and Waverley.
Oh, Glen Waverley, good job.
Oh, of course.
This is the one I couldn't.
That's so funny. Got it. And any other questions from you, Olivia, or you're on mute?
Oh, your mic's gone.
I've asked many questions.
All good.
Cool. That was super helpful. Like, understanding youth services, youth programs was a pretty key priority coming out of our feedback. So it was really great that you were able to spend some time today going through that. We have about 10 minutes left, and assuming everyone's still okay to continue going for those 10 minutes, what I was keen to do is perhaps have a look at the case study that we looked at during the training in our first session, and just see if we can get a little bit further through that. I'm going to see if I can share it so that it comes up on the screen and I'll see it.
It might be super useful to talk about the first bits, the young people bits, particularly.
What are you seeing? What is anyone seeing?
Got it. I got it.
Can you see it on the Zoom screen? No.
Yeah.
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 Okay. So what did you propose, sorry, Olivia, that we have a look at?
Because it's a youth focus, should we have a look at the stuff before she's kind of 25?
Perfect.
Yep.
Yeah, I think we talked about this last time, didn't we, Danielle?
A little bit.
Yeah.
You talk about it. Yeah, you're right.
There's definitely a few points, I think, you know, even at 16, before she was technically homeless, there could have been youth support involved if the school or someone had identified, you know, there's issues at home, there's issues with truancy. After she couch surfs and the transient, again at 19, 100% somewhere that youth services could have picked up, whether that was a youth housing worker, you know, case coordinating with an AOD or family violence. There's a lot of things going on, that there are tons of programs at that age that she could have been linked in with.
What program? And any particular housing programs?
Well, I would say at 19, when she's couch surfing, you'd definitely be looking at refuge, supported refuge, I think, and then potentially, depending on the drug use, where that ends up going. And then I would think in the paragraph after that, when she hits her early 20s and she's actually engaged with youth workers and TAFE, that's the perfect example of someone who would go to FOIA.
I was just going to say, what about that one where
It's really the perfect example, because it does say she entered student accommodation and that, but, you know, it didn't work out because she didn't have any setup. Youth FOIA would help the transition there. they would have made sure that when she transitioned to that student accom, that she was supported through that and ready for that independent tenancy.
Yeah, and she also could have applied for education costs through SEEP, so that as well. And there's also the FRUMP, which I think I've mentioned before, which is good for counselling or mediation. That could also, within those first 3 paragraphs, could have been accessed as well.
That's like from the starting point, it didn't have to necessarily, a housing case manager might be a bit full on, maybe while she was still at home, but even just something like a mentor, like through White Line, like a positive mentor, because a lot of the drug use is from what the paragraph says is around being with the wrong crowd and wanting to break free, but just sticking along with the wrong crowd. And so something simple, which is not a good entry point into community services, the system, might be something like a mentor, which is a volunteer, through White Line, who volunteers their time to mentor disadvantaged young people.
And they're really good, actually. We've had some good outcomes with that. And that's actually some of our exit strategies have been to link them in with that mentor.
Ongoing.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the key things for us that we see in IAP with youth is that that even if the youth aren't ready to go to refuge, they don't want to go to refuge because there's curfew and rules, or they're happy with their couch surfing, or they're, ambivalent, they can still be linked in with an intensive case manager who can support them with their issues, housing and referrals otherwise, until the time that they are ready to make some of those changes. So don't think just because there isn't a housing option ready for them, or because they're not ready for the housing option, that they can't still be linked in with someone who can try and work with them.
Yeah, exactly. We have like what's called an IR1, which is Interim Response. And exactly what Danielle said, it's just that phone call every 2 weeks or whatever time frame that they want, just to check, how's it going? Do you need anything at the moment? What's happening? And keeping in contact so that the support's not then offered once they're already in crisis. Because if we do some diversion and work on things before that kind of happens, that's like the best outcome.
So looking at that and seeing, I guess, a range of different opportunities, what would be your best case scenario? If as Linka and Chloe, if you could just jump in and say, well, at this point, this is what I'd like to see happen. At this point, this is what I'd like to see happen. So not necessarily, if you're picking up with your youth lens, all of the opportunities and those points of opportunities, what would you say?
Well, the first paragraph, I would like to think that the school social worker would be involved and flag any concerns, and whether that's to child protection or whether that's to a support service, or just flagging it, and to make sure that everyone's all over it, and then there's this maybe a care team occurring within the school, including a social worker, the teacher, the sentence that she says she toyed with making changes, I think that's really important, because there's the opportunity for engagement there. That would be a pivotal point. She's ready to start the recovery journey, and that would be the pivotal point that services could latch onto.
And for me, that thing, where I think also that she took refuge in her creativity shows that she's able to have some protective behaviours that don't rely on using as well.
Yep.
And that's why I love the foyer in that space, because of that advantaged thinking. Someone who does have those ambitions or goals, they would really, really support a lot of that stuff, and try and find ways to help her build on those independent skills and those positive skills and strengths that she has, not just focusing on you use ICE or you're homeless or you're damaged. It's about you're an amazing musician, you're creative, you're independent, and building on that as well. So.
And what about her time? Apart from foyer, because she says here that she's engaged, which I'm not dismissing that.
No. But other,
but like
for everyone.
No. But she's kind of like being involved with youth workers at that point. Again, where do you see the option to improve her outcomes there other than what's happened.
Is this for
Everybody, anybody?
Where are we?
like, to me, while they're reading it, I would also say that it seems like with the help of TAFE social workers and youth workers, she actually did really well. And at the point where it says it broke down again was that living and having no setup and establishment skills in the housing is where her relapse broke down. And so for me, you know, even something simple like PrAP that helps her with establishment, and then maybe a youth program like YOLO, or something that is focused around independent living skills like budgeting and cooking and all of those things, just to help her feel like supported in establishing her adult life, so that she didn't feel overwhelmed to the point that relapse may have happened anyway, but reducing those stress.
I mean, what would have been good at the time when the social workers got her into student accommodation, it would have been nice if she had been linked in with a housing support worker so that when she transitioned into student accommodation, they could help her with that. You know, they could be involved for 3 months, providing support with the living skills, address any issues about experiencing, and also work with the AOD worker, you know, as a team. You know, getting together and kind of working out a good plan for her to be able to sustain that tenancy.
This as well, just being ahead a little bit, that it's just at the points of crisis. I mean, without those external impacts, she seems to be doing really well.
Yeah.
She's able to manage, she's able to cope. It's only when there's these kind of, I guess it's the same as most people, big life changes, big transitions, unexpected impacts or changes, that she then just doesn't have that coping mechanism. So it's, you know, that speaks to her resilience and her capacity for, you know, her own support internally. Do you know what I mean? It's just like the impacts,
Yeah, so just looking at all that, there's so many opportunities for AOD and housing services to work together, but we don't always do that. And half the time it is because, and it sounds like that youth services have a little bit more space to do that work together than perhaps adult services do, which is always a bonus. I imagine most of the time for youth AOD services, it is outreach-based case management, and there'd be a big opportunity there for the housing outreach case manager to also co-case manage, I guess. You probably have to sit down and meet and figure out who does what in that space as well, because sometimes I can hear from you that it's not just about, you know, where are we going to go tonight and those sorts of things. It's around a holistic kind of response from housing, which is kind of I think a novelty in many kind of adult housing sort of situations. So I think that there would be huge opportunity there to actually work together. But I would recommend that you both sit down, because sometimes people, particularly with young people, particular service providers or even people have different agendas to the other people that are working with that young person, and sometimes I think that it's a real opportunity to work together in that space.
Care teams are, like in the youth space, care teams are vital. Most young people have got an array of services involved, you know, whether that's legal, housing, you know, counselling, AOD, whatever. Like some care teams I've been to have been 12 services involved, and that's, you know, that's probably getting to the point where it's probably overwhelming for the young person. So there is a fine line between how many services, but the idea that you were talking about around everyone being on the same page and everyone having a clear understanding of everyone's role, but also the young person, and we always invite the young person to care teams, so that they have ownership over the case plan. They have clear direction into where they're heading and where they're going in terms of their goals, and who's supporting them with what, because it's confusing. You know, it can be really confusing when many services involved.
And I also think it creates understanding between workers because, you know, a housing worker might be like, oh, well, they're linked in with AOD. Why are they still doing drugs? And then an AOD worker might be like, well, they're linked in with a housing worker. Where's the house? And I think it's sometimes it's good to get together, talk about those realities. And so then you can be on the same page. Difficulties and barriers.
Yeah. And also if there's maybe risk identified as well, it's really important that everyone is, you know, working with that risk in the same way. You know, it's unfair on the young person. You know, Lenka, maybe there's a risk that identified that when you're transporting a young person alone in a car, that there's a risk, a real risk. And it's unfair for the young person if Lenka's transporting that young person in a car by themselves all the time. But then I've been told by my management that we have to only have appointments in the office. So also around being on each other's at the same page in regards to risk, but also how we're splitting workers is a very big thing for young people. So, you know, that we're not, you know, the young person might be like, oh, Lenka told me this and you know, when Lenka didn't tell them that, you know. So just the workers need to be on the same page so they can support each other to then support that young person.
That seems like a beautiful place to bring all this, wrap it all up and bring this together. I mean, I think that idea of everyone working together in the best interests of the young person and even the adults. I mean, the principles are still there, but the opportunity is not just to create better outcomes for the young person, but to really improve shared understandings of each other's work and sectors and how to work better together. So important, and it's just how do we find the time for that?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, how do you prioritise time for that? Because I think most people are absolutely on board with it. It's just not themselves. But you can start, right? Yeah, you can totally start. I'll stop sharing that screen. But I did just want to say a huge thank you to everybody today for being involved, for Lenka and Chloe for that really great overview of working in youth supports and youth services, and also Danielle and Olivia for your ongoing contribution through this community practice. The video will pop up online, and the community practice is still open for another few days if people do have any other queries or questions. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, guys. I'm just going to start recording. Ciao.
Bye. Thank you.